Welcome to the mayhem. Dick and Lloyd mayhem. Media mayhem. Marketing a mayhem. You might love it, you might hate it. It's my favorite freaking show.
Stay tuned and find out. And join Loy and myself as we chat with Bill Haw Sr., the guy who owns the Livestock Exchange Building and pretty much everything else in the West Bottoms south of 670. What an incredible story he has.
All right, Dick, we're with Bill Haws down in the Livestock Exchange Building today.
What a wonderful place to be.
It's unbelievable. You talk about one of those timeless treasures in Kansas City, and that the gentleman we're talking to today has really pretty much single-handedly saved this building and this neighborhood. Bill, thank you so much for having us here in your cool space. Love this place. Tell us, how did this happen? How did you wind up down here taking this whole area and doing what you're doing with it?
Well, how could I possibly expand on what you've just said? I couldn't do anything but
all right, well, thanks for being here, everybody.
No, I have the advantage in recent decades of having accumulated enough in my life that I can do things in a way that I think are special. And I think this building and this neighborhood are a great example of that.
Absolutely.
If I didn't think it, I would begin to think it because I hear it every day from people in the neighborhood.
A lot of interesting people have made this their place of business, and now there are apartments down here that you've put in next to the Livestock Exchange Building. This is one of the great, grand old buildings left in the city, built when?
1910.
1910.
Yeah.
And you've left it essentially the same. I mean, no unnecessary polishing and paneling and anything. I mean, this has got all the great old materials. It's a timeless feel.
It is good wooden floors and things like that.
Oh, yeah. Tile.
Back in when the place opened, there are 9 floors of a lot of offices in this building.
Mm-hmm.
Who populated this building?
It was primarily populated by commission traders who made their living buying and selling cattle out in the stockyards.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which was all you could see here, 12,000 men, 60,000 cattle in a single day.
60,000 in a day could come in.
Yeah, the biggest day ever. 5 rail lines, I think.
Wow.
Leading into it. So it was, even by today's standard, it was an enormous thing, but relative to the rest of the city then, it was just an incredible, overwhelming economic presence.
When was the final time that there was cattle brought into this area?
Well, it's probably not that easily definable.
Yeah.
It was precipitated by the emergence of the large cattle feed yards, where up until then, cattle were owned in very small numbers by an infinite number of small farmers. The feedlots concentrated the presence, and not in Kansas City, but in more remote places. And the commission merchants all migrated toward where the bulk of the cattle were.
Okay.
Now, there were reasons in those days that they had to have hubs, like Kansas City, Chicago.
Exactly.
What were the big hubs, and what was that?
Probably Omaha, Kansas City, and Chicago would have been the principal hubs.
And it was because of the rail yards and the refrigeration and all these other reasons.
Well, it was a place to take what was a economically tiny fragmented series of owners of cattle and bring them into a place where concentrations of ownership would exist, primarily directly from the farmer owner to the packing houses across the river. I believe there were 12 across the river.
Yeah.
And are you in the cattle business, or have you been, or is this just something that you took a liking to, an interest in this area?
I had become, I'm a former banker and a former owner-operator of a large agricultural farming company. Did really the first huge concentrated hog ownership, kind of parroted what they had done in the chicken business from a fragmented, tiny industry to a very highly consolidated, efficient business. So I had quite a bit of experience in agriculture, and I'm also a large rancher landowner in the Flint Hills.
That's right. I want to talk about that soon, because people were telling me about the Flint Hills thing that you had going on out there with the music, and I think you recently sold the property or part of it, or
I've sold some of the
of it.
Flint Hills land. I think I
Beautiful
probably,
land. I've seen pictures of it. Amazing.
Scenic is sometimes more valuable than practicality.
Uh-huh.
And if you've got both,
Yeah.
you have the best of all worlds.
Now, you went from banking to a large-scale, innovative hog operation?
Well, there was an interim step. I went from banking, and I did have a wonderful career at the Commerce Bank.
Commerce Bank here in Kansas City.
Yeah, and within probably 6 years or so, I was offered the presidency of the bank as a very young man. Turned it down because I felt like I would have had to stay forever if I accepted that incredible honor. And then a publicly held company, the directors came to me of a company that owned 30 or 40,000 acres of irrigated farmland and were going broke. Asked me how I might assist them in executing that bankruptcy, and I, for some strange reason, said, I guess the best thing you could do would be to hire me and I'll fix it and we'll own it together. So at that point it was a company with the glamorous name of National Alfalfa Dehydrating and Milling Company.
That rolls right off the tongue.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it was a publicly held company, and their principal asset were a huge ownership of irrigated farmland. I had the reputation, if not the resources, to be able to borrow the money that they needed, and by running the company a little better, made it a very successful company. The next step was to build a hog operation that really parroted what Don Tyson had done in the chicken business, which was take a highly fragmented, scattered business and make it an extremely high-volume, concentrated business. I thought, gosh, if Don could do that with the chickens, I bet I could do it with the hogs. So that was the next step in the business.
Well, how old were you at this point?
Oh, more than 12, I think.
You said you'd been a banker for 5 years?
It was a total of 10 years.
10 years?
Yeah.
You were a very young man when you were doing these big deals.
I was, yeah. And as an English literature major, again,
An
I had
English
the advantage
literature,
of not-
typical English literature
not knowing
major
anything.
slacker.
That's right.
That's a fantastic story. So you were a fast study, obviously, in the agriculture world, and you picked up on what Tyson was doing with chicken, and completely built this operation from scratch, modeling it after that. And
I did, yeah. I think
Wow.
I remember talking to then the president of IBP, now Tyson Foods, and I did have access to him because the company that I took over had owed them $6 million that they couldn't pay him. I got them paid, so I became popular.
yeah,
Yeah,
so he had all kinds of time for you.
he did.
You took advantage of it.
Anyway, at that time, the average transaction for this largest hog processing company in the world was 19 pigs per purchase. And so the genetics and other economics of the business were equally fragmented. It just seemed to me that there was a perfect parallel with what Don Tyson had done in the chicken business to do it in the hog business. So at that time, inflation was diminishing. We sold all the farmland that we had then, put the money in the very large concentrated hog business.
Now, would consumers today be familiar with the name of the company that you...
Well, the company, we really broke it into pieces and sold it to a number of others who were sort of parroting what we had done.
I see.
So there wouldn't be an identifiable survivor. And of course, the business we had then would be a small fraction of the huge businesses that have kind of parroted what we were doing.
Well, I know that Kansas City's the home of a gargantuan company that few people know about it being here. It's Smithfield.
Yeah, I think we sold Smithfield one of our hog operations. It's a long time ago.
The amount of ham that goes through that company is just astounding.
It is astounding, and pork has gone from being sort of poor folks' food, a very greasy, inexpensive thing, to a highly concentrated industry that is focused on genetics that are a much better product than pork used to be.
All right, Mr. Haw.
Okay.
Pork. What was it? The white meat? What was it called?
The other white meat.
The other white meat.
Yes.
Good. A good line. A success for our marketing and media people.
It was an incredible success in that chicken was no longer a product that you bought the whole animal. It was a product that was centered totally around breast meat. A very clean, white, adaptable meat that could be used in any number of flavor combinations. And that really is one of the things that made it a great transition for the chicken business. The pork loin became kind of the same marketing deal as the chicken breast had become. So yeah, and that's when it began to be referred to as the other white meat.
Yeah, well, that one stuck with me for a while. Being in the business, I can't get any of those old slogans or jingles out of my head, but that one was amazing.
You probably even wrote a song about it at some point.
Did,
yeah.
Wasn't it perfect, though, when you saw the enormous success of the chicken business based around the white meat, the breast meat, so that it was really parroting an immensely successful transition that the chicken business.
Seems like those hogs were just following those chickens all around. Everything about them. They learned from the chicken. So then you also transitioned after that into some other, into ranching?
Yeah, the next step really was cattle feed yards, which were becoming larger and larger. We had initially bought 3 or 4 feedlots in the western United States and did a fair amount of what they call custom feeding, which is feeding cattle for small producers. That was not a good business. The small producers were difficult to work with, unpredictable, had varied and not always very good genetics. So we began to own all of our own cattle and specialize in a better product, really. We ended up being, I think, the second largest cattle feeders in the United States.
And was that a privately held company that you built, or was it just you? Or?
The Bass family in Fort Worth, immensely wealthy and wonderful people, kind of midway in that transition with the company, had come to me and asked if I would partner with them if they invested heavily and took the company private. Which once I figured out who the Brass family were, seemed like a really good idea.
Mm-hmm.
But we've always tried to get in. I've always tried to get into businesses at sort of an embryonic stage and get out when everybody else wanted to get in. So again, we sold the farmland, and it only owned farmland because of the appreciation potential in very fine farmland in an inflationary economy. We sold the hog business when lots of larger producers than we were decided they wanted to be in it. I sold the cattle feeding business as it had become more and more profitable, and began to buy for my own personal account land in the Flint Hills.
Well, now, so you've successfully, people talk about scalability a lot in business. Of course, the way they do it these days with the Amazon model and all that's kind of bizarre, actually, compared to doing it the old-fashioned way like you did. But when you were scaling these businesses up, what were some of the general principles or lessons or ideas that you might share with people who are going in, like you say, going in there early in the embryonic stage, and they have the desire to scale that business up?
Mm-hmm. Well, it was all of those things were based around the additional efficiency and productivity of utilizing economies of scale.
Mm-hmm.
And economies of scale would also give you access to better genetics. So you had the efficiencies that came with economies of scale, and you needed to be able to get the capital together to create economies of scale, but also the additional value that came of being able to concentrate a particular higher quality product than had been available before.
Beginning in banking and then going to be an entrepreneur like you did that help your ability to get capital with the banking background?
I think it did, yeah. I had a sort of a visible ascendancy in the banking business, and the Commerce Bank was the largest commercial bank in the 10th Federal Reserve District, so it was a highly visible company that I worked for, and I had a pretty visible sort of an ascendancy within that company that gave me a tremendous advantage.
What were some of the successes in the banking in your early career that led to such a high profile career, such a high trajectory with your career path, them offering you that role?
You know, I'm not sure. I was one of 14 of sort of the original transition that the Commerce Bank was making from focusing on officers from well-to-do and well-known families to trying to focus on people. None of the 14 that they hired trainees were from an identifiable Kansas City family. For one reason or another, they kept pulling me out of one thing and putting it into first the Commerce Tower, then the formation of the holding company, and I ran the first bank that they sent me down to Joplin to run the first bank. In the holding company, they came back ostensibly to be the president of the company. So it was not one thing, it was a whole series of things.
Wow. Fascinating.
Quite a deal, yeah. In front of you, you've got a drawing here. What is this we're looking at here?
What we're looking at here is not something that I did, but something that the association for this larger neighborhood did. This whole area has historically been known as the West Bottoms.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like what we're doing south of 670 in this triangle, much of which I own, was going to be very different from the really cool area north of 670 that's been traditionally called the West Bottoms. I've renamed this area, and the name has caught on as the Stockyards District, primarily, well, I guess to ride on the reputation of the stockyards in the historically, but more to differentiate it from the rest of the West Bottoms. A very cool place, but not the kind of place that we're developing down here.
Okay, so right now, right around the Livestock Exchange Building, there are two really nice apartment projects here. Tell us a little bit about those and the other developments right here, and then tell us what's online for this other area.
Okay. Well, originally, what I bought originally, and of course, dumb luck has followed me around all my life. The 48 acres that I bought of this awful-looking abandoned stockyards, completely unknown to me, was underlaid with millions of stockyards bricks, which are virtually worshipped in Kansas City. So I ended up selling half of the bricks for more than I paid for the whole 48 acres.
Wow.
Dumb luck.
Holy cow.
My gosh.
You're the first brick magnate I've ever
Who would have
heard
thought?
of. A bricionaire.
So again, we've tried to keep the magic of the old stockyards name and some of the assets of it and change it. The other thing that hardly anybody knows is 20 acres of what I've got left here along the Kansas River is on this side of the river. It's now green, nice, developable land, and 20 acres of it is in Kansas, even though it's on this side of the river. There wouldn't be 1% of the people in Kansas City who would even believe me if I told them, but it is.
That's wild.
It is wild. So again, the development that you ask about,
So you probably got some steamships buried under there and stuff.
unquestionably, yeah, and they add immensely to the value of
We
the
could dig
remaining
down there and
property.
pull out some bric-a-brac and ceramic things.
And again, the one thing that first attracted me to the neighborhood was when I got out of the Army, turned out to be just 1 year of graduate work in finance, because several banks had been interested in hiring me. I didn't even speak their language. So I did go back to the University of Missouri in the finance program. Commerce Bank came down, offered me a job right on the spot. I remember asking Ples Miller, the president of the bank, who had come down to talk to me, do you want me to finish my master's or come to work now? And his answer, I'll never forget, was, I'll pay you $420 a month then, or I'll pay you $420 a month now. And the decision was obvious. The big money. Anyway, we now have these really nice all concrete apartment that I built across the way, smaller with commercial space on it, doing very well. And then
With commercial space, you mean on the bottom?
yeah, there are two architectural firms that have
Okay.
the first floor.
So tell me what kind of person is looking to live down here. I mean, this is an exciting area. You've got the river, and I mean, you're right down here in this interesting area. You're kind of separated from the city.
Separated from, but adjacent to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have any of the typical, you've got wide open space.
Yeah.
And it's right next door to the city, but what type of person, who's coming down here? What are the rents like? What is it like to live down here right now?
The rents are very competitive. And again, we only have in existence right now, we only have the one small apartment project across the street. There are 320 units being built here. Land
In the yards,
In the yards.
the new one.
That I sold to Flaherty and Collins a large national apartment developer.
Okay.
I have retained some.
And that's the old Golden Ox parking lot.
It
kind
is
of,
the
was it?
old Golden Ox
Yeah.
parking
Mhm.
lot,
Sure.
right? Yeah.
Okay, so you retained ownership of the older apartment building?
This is a brand new one that I built across the street. I do own that one.
Okay.
I sold
And that one's called the Stockyards Place?
Stockyards Place.
Okay.
This one is called the Yards, and I've retained a financial interest in it
Okay.
during the construction phase. We are already planning a second large apartment unit that will be across the state line, but this side of the river. Have to always make that because I think we'll see, as I was when I came to Kansas City. I'd never lived in Kansas City. I'd never been in Kansas City, but it seemed like a really wonderful place to live. Everybody in the Commerce Bank said, if you're going to have kids, you need to live on the Kansas side, and so I did. What we will be able to offer people is Missouri on this side of the street and Kansas on that side of the street.
And the Mocan Bar right in the middle of both of
There
them.
you
That's
go.
right. And when the cops come, everybody shifts to the other
Shifted
side
to
of the
the side,
room.
yeah.
That's one of the benefits.
You never know what kind of
Yes.
state laws are going to
Yeah.
pass.
There'll be
you know?
marijuana on one side
right.
and none on the across the street. So. Oh, wow. That is phenomenal.
So you've got other interesting people down here. You've got, what is it called? Amagoni?
The Amagoni
Winery?
Yeah.
Wines?
In the Drover's Telegram building that I bought out of bankruptcy several years ago. And Carrie and Michael Amagoni have built a incredibly successful winery and event space in the Drover's Telegram building, which has DMH Marketing, a very successful company. It has the upper floors of that building.
Wow. It's an interesting place to be. I mean, the vistas are really fantastic. You can really see a whole lot of the city. River, air, all kinds of highways.
Now, were you involved in the redevelopment of the Hy-Vee arena down here at all?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I was involved initially, but the guarantee terms of the lender were not satisfactory to me, so so I did not continue with the plan to be part of it.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a fabulous facility. Steve Fouch has done an incredible job. Went from one basketball court to 12 basketball courts,
Yeah.
plus a number of other athletic and recreational facilities. So it's a great addition to the neighborhood.
And what other tenants are down here that are interesting for food and beverage and things like that?
Butler Manufacturing, again, I had happened to have been on the board of that company for a long time when they needed to make a move, and they agreed to buy several acres down here and build a new national headquarters for Butler Manufacturing.
Is this actually a manufacturing facility for them, or is
No,
it
it's
just a
strictly
headquarters?
headquarters
Okay.
office. Yeah. So they've been wonderful tenants. I sold my initial transaction was to sell 17 acres to Gateway Computers. Then and
Gosh, the old
temporarily
Gateway. Wow.
a
Yeah.
legendary name.
Yeah.
I thought, gee, what a brilliant thing for me to have done. And of course, their future was not nearly as good as their past.
Yeah.
Well, now is that the Stockyards location? Why they painted their boxes like Holsteins or whatever that was?
No, but you may be familiar with what I call the Bull Mountain, which
Right.
is
Sure.
a Flint Hills replica. Ted Waite, I think was his name, was the chairman. He always told me he was going to have people sneak in and paint the bulls on the Bull Mountain like Holsteins, which I assured him there'd be severe consequences if he did that. But now we have Mark I Electric there, and the state of Missouri has an office in that property. So Gateway didn't last, but we've ended up with two wonderful tenants. Not tenants of mine, I'm sorry, occupants.
Occupants down here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you see a lot of this development happening over the next 5 years. Is that your plan as far as that, or?
To me, I'm 80 years old, so 5 years sounds like a long time. Let's make it quicker than
All right,
that.
let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, for 80, I see that bicycle and helmet there. That's probably yours, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. You've got an obviously active lifestyle. You ride that saddle anywhere?
Yeah, I
What's
used
the story
to.
on that thing?
That one was given to me by a man whose father had worked here all of his life, and a very touching story. He brought the saddle in, said his dad had ridden that saddle all of his working life, and he knew that it would make him happy to know that I had it, and so he gave it to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. What
Yeah.
about the statue behind you there of the big cowboy on the horse?
That's a work in bronze by Ulysses Grant Speed. I bought another smaller one there from him, and I really felt like he was the best artist ever in Western bronzes. So I've accumulated a number of his works over a period of time. I bought this one to put here in my office, and then as we redeveloped this whole building, the second floor at the head of the staircase was so perfect that I did something I wouldn't ever have wanted to do, was buy 2 of the 15 examples of this particular sculpture, just because it looks so perfect down there.
It does, yeah.
It does look great. Now, this building has a lot of quirky, interesting attributes, like the bathroom situation is pretty fun.
Yeah.
I love that story. I was talking to Art Fillmore, who's one of your tenants, and I said, Art, there's not, I can't find the restroom. And he said, well, you got to go to the next floor. He said they had to make this a women's restroom because they didn't have women's restrooms
Well, they didn't have women.
because
Back
they
in the
didn't
day.
need them.
Yeah.
So when this was built, this was a man's world down here.
You know, it really was completely a man's world, and again, every architect that I talked to about redoing the building, because it was a derelict, wanted to modernize it, narrow down the halls, narrow the lobbies, the elevator lobbies, and I said, I don't want to do that. Just make it look brand new, exactly like it probably looked.
I'm
when
so
they
glad
built
you
it.
did that.
I am too, and I think it'd be safe to say that all or virtually all of the tenants in the building are awful glad I did it too.
There is a romance, there's a timelessness to it that feels like no place else. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, the only thing I can compare recently, the experience, was going back to Leavenworth for a meeting and driving down that main street.
Is that the prison where you had spent some
Yes,
time?
well, I was there. I was just visiting a friend,
Yeah.
some friends, old friends. But the way that old main street is opened up and those buildings are essentially for several blocks are untouched, it's that wonderful feeling of timelessness. And that's kind of how I feel when I walk into the lobby of this building.
I have people tell me that every single day, and a lot of people will come here to visit friends or customers who have space in the building, and will make it a point to come up here and tell me how much they love the building. So there's something magical about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And our city, Kansas City, is like probably every other city in the country. Many people spend their entire day and evening, they live, they work in places where everything around them is newer than they are.
Yeah.
And that's just a little disturbing. It's fun to go into a place where it's older than your daddy.
It's even older than me.
Quite a bit.
That's right. No, it is a wonderful old building, and I am fiercely proud of what we've done here and how many people seem to love it.
Well, you cultivate artistic, creative, whatever you want to call that creative class. I hate that term, but I notice there are an awful lot of people who are engaged in the arts that are down here.
That was another crazy, dumb thing that I did when we remodeled the building. Was I left the entire 5th floor virtually undeveloped for affordable artist studios. Now, why in the hell I did that when my other experience had been the Commerce Tower, where everybody wore identical suits and ties and acted and looked the same.
Did you wear a Homburg?
I did not. But yeah, keeping that 5th floor undeveloped for affordable artist studios turned out to be a great part of the culture that we've created here. And we have a long waiting list of people, and several people who have rented more expensive space in the building, waiting for space to come available on the 15th floor.
What is it about that appeals to you? How does that make you feel to be able to do that? To be able to take part of that and say, I mean, this is an old school incubator, really.
Yeah.
Well, before all the fancy terms and for all the pats on the back and virtue signaling and aren't we great, we're incubators. Legitimately, this is like I was telling you about my old dearly departed friend Charles Hanson, who rented my partner and me in our art studio, the entire building where Californo's restaurant was for so long, for $150 a month, and we had the run of that place, and we had a huge art studio down there, and it was tremendous for us. But he did that just because he got a kick out of allowing people to who were in the creative field to have that opportunity. So what is it about that made you do that?
Well, first of all, my mother was an artist, a lifetime artist. Crazy story. My dad was in medical school. She was in St. Louis Institute of Art. They became involved. He talked her into switching into nursing, and she got a nursing degree and never practiced nursing a day in her life, but created art every day of her life. So I grew up in a family that valued and appreciated art for other than economic reasons. My son came back to work with me from Japan, where he'd had an incredible career, among other things, running a large part of Amazon in that part of the world. And after a few years, when the Dolphin Gallery closed down, John O'Brien wasn't going to let another artist buy it, but I kind of talked John into leasing it, or selling it, to my son, who is a natural born artist himself. I am not. I appreciate it, but I have absolutely no artistic, creative talent, whatever. Anyway, all my life I've been around artists and art, and I've always appreciated the difference between artistic benefit and economic benefit.
Well, tell us a little about your son and what he's been doing then.
He's been incredibly successful. Again, John O'Brien was good enough to agree to sell it to someone who would carry it on as a gallery. He runs it as a business, and he's doing extremely well as a business, has a second location in the Crossroads now, and is maybe looking at some other real
What does he
estate
call the
opportunities.
business?
It's the Dolphin.
Okay.
The Dolphin.
Yeah. Which it was under that same name with John O'Brien.
Okay. Very well known gallery.
Yeah.
What have we missed out on in talking with you, do you think? Anything else?
Yeah, maybe access to the river. There's not been anything other than industrial development along the Kansas River. The Kansas River is not very much like the Missouri River, which in Berkeley Park is spectacular, beautiful. But the Missouri River is very threatening. The Kansas River, on the other hand, is very peaceful and quiet. A number of years ago, I funded the Kansas City Rowing Club, and they still are operating out of the shipping containers you can see along the river.
You're
there.
kidding.
Okay.
I have no idea about that.
You see the 4 women in the
Oh,
photograph there.
Sure.
They and for a long period of time, they and every other woman who learned to row there got a Title IX scholarship to go to college. Pretty cool.
Wow.
That is fascinating.
And if there's anything more beautiful than 4, 6, or 8 women rowing a beautiful boat in
Yeah.
the river, I don't know what it would
I have
be.
never experienced
Wow.
that firsthand.
I've seen it on TV.
You know what? Will you let me know next time they're rowing so I can come down to the
I
call?
think they're usually, well, the river's been so high that it hasn't been friendly to shells.
No, I usually come down to the call just before the Macy's on the call, or maybe just visit the Potato King, or all those other call-related things. But you were saying the shelves are.
Yeah, the rowing club is continuously operated there for a number of years now, but it's been a tough year because of the current in the river.
So do they just not do it those years?
They still maintain it very well, and they row occasionally, but again, it's not been a very friendly environment compared to what it usually is. The other thing we haven't talked about is the proposal to develop the bridge.
I
the
wondered
railroad
about that.
bridge.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Kansas City, Kansas, very supportive of it. Again, the bridge is in Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
And the mayor of Kansas City, Kansas, David Alvey, has seen to it that the next, I think, 4 or 5 miles of their levee top road on the other side of the river going upstream is now developed as a trail. It isn't yet hooked up to the bridge, but it's in the process
Okay.
of doing that. And then we'll also hook up on this side, and this levee top road it's as beautiful a trail as the Katy Trail is.
Really?
Yeah.
And what is the bridge called? Do you know?
Yeah, I think it's the Rock Island Bridge.
The Rock Island Bridge?
Yeah.
And what is the surface of the bridge itself like?
Right now it's a railroad ties and rails.
Mm-hmm.
It will be, of course, a flat surface.
And it would be a biking and walking trail, is that the
Biking
idea?
and walking, and the developer of it wants to put facilities there, restaurants, bars, event spaces on the bridge, but maintain the trailway for the deal. It's really a cool idea. Hopefully we'll be able to open up the levee top road all the way down to the Woodsweather Bridge, which is a beautiful and almost never used walking bridge across the Kansas River where it intersects with the Missouri
Really?
River.
Don't even think I knew that was there.
I didn't
Yeah.
know it was
Oh,
there.
you should see it.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. So how could people find that walking bridge?
made it back.
Hopefully we'll end up with a loop trail from this bridge to that bridge here.
How many people are going to be living in this patch of ground here
Eventually,
eventually?
a few thousand. Yeah, initially I thought I wanted to do some kind of luxury condos along the river there because the riverfront is so beautiful there. But what I need is population. And the only way you get population, as my son pointed out to me, having come from Tokyo, is vertical.
No. Okay.
So, yeah, there will be offices and apartments all along the river here. And I own, I think, several acres, a strip along the top there, next to the river top that we'll keep. I've offered to sell it to Kansas City, Kansas, for a riverfront park, just 2,000 linear feet.
So the Haw is a mellower river.
Very,
Should be,
very peaceful river. Yeah.
Should be something that we take advantage of.
And it's something that you'd let your kids walk down and fish in the river, and wouldn't worry about them getting swept away.
Where is that island? How far away is that island that resides in the middle of the Haw?
Up this way a few miles.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's always fascinating
Yeah.
too.
Yep.
Can you build some apartments on that island? I'd kind of like to go out there. Dick, let's get some Lime or Bird scooters and go out to the island.
All right, sounds good. Yeah.
But this area here, this, again, I think I've got about 17 acres maybe along the river here, is just going to be ideal. I mean, it really will be. I'm already seeing young women with kids walking their kids and their dogs over to the river over here, and that will be times 100 as we get the other apartments finished.
Well, you've done great things here. I'm so glad that you found this before it went the way of all the other great old buildings.
Well, I am too, and it's, it all goes back to the finance courses that I took at the University of Missouri that were totally focused on access ramps to the brand new concept of interstate highways.
So that and dumb luck.
That and dumb luck, yeah.
What a
Dumb luck
great
was probably
combination.
first. Yeah.
Well, I guess one of the things about Kansas City, the people who I grew up here, and Dick grew up here, and we've talked about this before. It's a hub. That's what it is. It's its reason to exist, is that it's a hub, which is something that people don't really. I mean, I never heard that when I was a kid growing up, that it's a rail hub, it's a highway hub, it's an air hub, it's a water hub, it's a storage, it's underground storage. I mean, it's a great manufacturing, distributing, storage hub.
Though, I think more, and I'm talking from personal experience as much as anything, but the job offers that I had before I went to the Commerce were in Houston, Los Angeles, St. Louis, somewhere else, and Kansas City. And the reason I came to Kansas City is I thought, what a wonderful place to live and raise your children. That was more important than all those other things put together. I kind of think that's a big part of the attraction of Kansas City. The feeling of being in Kansas City compared to just St. Louis is night and day.
I've got to agree with you on that particular comparison.
Yeah. Well, try Los Angeles or Houston.
Been there.
Lived on a couch there, haven't you?
Yeah, I did. But and you're in the hub of the hub.
I think so.
I mean, Kansas City wasn't a cow town. It wasn't a cattle hub. It was just a hub, and cattle was the thing that was being
It was the big deal then.
hubbed.
Yeah, yeah. Can you imagine 60,000 cattle arriving here in one day and being unloaded and penned, probably at 30 or 40 head per pen? Some of those pens were 4 stories high.
Yeah, wow.
Well, I think
You know-
everybody who grew up here remembers the smell.
I was just going to say
You
that.
knew it
That's I can still identify the smell of the stockyards wafting over
Have
the
you
city
ever heard
somewhere.
anybody say, "Wasn't that smell awful"? I never have.
Not really, no.
Yeah.
Either
We were
had that or
kids
you-
in the back seat of the car.
Yeah.
We'd been out all night with our parents had been somewhere, and we were going home. We always knew, oh, we know where we are now.
Yeah, we're here. It's either here or
We're
with the
getting
grain
close.
up in North Kansas City that I grew up around, the grain bins. So
Well, I'll tell everybody, if you haven't been to the stockyards area recently, there's absolutely no unpleasant odor.
there's no unpleasant odor. None.
It's way gone.
And there will be even less when Loy and I leave the
That's
area.
right.
No, Kansas City is, and I'm from a little bitty town, lead mining town down in the Ozarks.
And what was that town?
Bonne Terre.
Bonne Terre. I had friends that grew up in Flat River.
Oh, really?
I used to go to Flat River a lot with my
Yeah.
parents growing up. Yeah.
That's a musical kind of a name, isn't it?
Flat River.
Yeah. 6 miles away by bicycle. as I
Bonne Terre.
recall.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, sure. Used to go down and climb the chat dumps.
Chat dumps were wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, have you been to Bonne Terre recently?
Not as much as I should have, because I loved growing up there, and it's a great place to grow up and not a very good place to make a living. So
Well, I have a theory about Kansas City. And from growing up here and talking to so many people, I think 90% of the people that are anywhere around my age or older who are business people here in Kansas City have a connection to some town somewhere between Wichita and St. Louis that they either they have an affinity for it. They either want to go back to that town and show everybody that they're so much better than that town and get even with them, or they want to go save it, or they want to go hug it.
Yeah.
But they've all got a strong feeling about some small town
yeah,
that's around here, and you just got to scratch the surface and you find out, well, there's that boy.
Dell Dunmire, Harrisonville.
Yeah.
you know, though, it's so tragic that most of the small towns are just, there just isn't any economic value. Or Cottonwood Falls, where I've developed, you can see those 2 top ones there and the top 3 over here. And
Now, how did you
Beautiful
wind up
building.
getting involved in that? Just
Well,
more building, hugging? You just said that's a beautiful
Cottonwood
place that
Falls,
needs to be saved?
they've got a beautiful, beautiful courthouse, town
Uh-huh.
of 800 people. And all of these buildings that I've restored there were derelicts that were boarded up, full
Wow.
of pigeons, and yet they have no economic value. Cottonwood Falls, I think last year, was named one of the 5 most beautiful tiny towns in the United States. But those buildings that I've put millions of dollars in the aggregate into have no value. This one right there, see that stone building right there is partly covered.
Uh-huh.
Gosh, I think we put $400,000 into it, but the taxes are $10,000 a year, and the local realtor tells me you couldn't give it to anybody because they couldn't pay the $10,000 in taxes.
Yeah.
So
Well, the city loves you.
Cottonwood
Well,
Falls,
I
what
don't know
state is it?
whether
Where is that? Cottonwood Falls?
Cottonwood Falls would be just
In Kansas?
west and south of Emporia.
Oh, okay.
It's on Highway 177, which is now the National Scenic
okay.
Highway.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so that's not far from some of your Flint Hills property.
You're right.
Okay.
I own a few thousand acres 3 miles south of Cottonwood Falls.
I see.
And then I've got, I think, 17 miles of frontage on I-35 you know where the cattle pens are on I-35? Big cattle pens between Wichita and Emporia.
You know, I may just not remember.
Yeah, it's a
Same.
beautiful, beautiful overlook. It's the only overlook actually there.
Oh, yeah, I did see him.
Yeah.
Recently I went to Wichita.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember
Well,
now.
that's where I've got 12 miles of frontage, maybe, on as far as you can see on both sides. All of it's under conservation easement to perpetuity, which harms the value of it probably by $600 an acre, I think.
Now, do you need Loy and me to sit at this table and keep track of the things you own? Just so nobody's, so you,
I think I just
so you remember?
described them all.
Yeah, you did? Okay, that's good. We hit them all. That's cool.
Yeah.
We don't want anybody to steal them. Those houses in Cottonwood Falls.
That is phenomenal. Wow.
Yeah.
Great thing.
Well,
They're beautiful.
maybe someday, you know, there is a national park now just north of Cottonwood Falls, 11,000 acres. I used to lease actually until last year. That's a national park, but it hasn't generated that much activity for the little town.
What is the draw to the park? Just being a national
Just
camping?
the sheer beauty of same thing as. Well, I'll tell you, it kind of, you know, the Bass family are very, very wealthy people, and they're also very nice people, the four brothers. When I started buying, and they're the ones who bought a controlling interest in the company that I was running, when I started buying Flint Hills land, they became interested, two of the brothers, two really interesting stories. One, Lee Bass, who I'd bought several thousand acres for, and I were standing on a big hill on my ranch. Far as you can see, just beautiful, unspoiled, can't see the hand of man any place. And he said, "Now, Bill, explain this to me again." At that point, it was a lot cheaper than it is now. He said, "You mean," and I'd been partnering with him on some cattle that made a lot of money. He said, "You mean I can buy this land for $400 an acre, and we can run a cattle business that's very profitable on it, and maybe it's right here along I-35, and they're going to throw all that scenery in for free?" Now, he wasn't joking. He was making a very profound economic statement. The other one, I've got a beautiful home. I think there's a picture of it there, the second one from the bottom. And Ed Bass and I were sitting on the front porch drinking a beer one night, and I was pontificating about interest rates and the rate of inflation and return on the land in the short run and that sort of thing. And Ed punches me in the shoulder and he says, "Bill, this is priceless." Neither of those were casual remarks. They were very astute, financially aware, and important people who were summing it up really very beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. I'm a very fortunate, very lucky guy.
All right.
Dumb luck.
Dumb luck
Well,
does it
thank
all.
you.
That
Yep.
does it. What
This
a
has
great
been a wonderful
chat.
tour. Thank you.
Good.
What a wonderful thing. Well, good luck to you and all those things you want to do in the future.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Although you never know how it's gonna end up when you do a podcast, huh?
When we came to the West Bottoms to interview Bill Haw,
Yeah.
I I didn't think we'd be crawling up an embankment down by the river. I didn't think we'd be like sticking our toe in the caw.
Yeah.
I didn't think we would be at a winery.
I didn't either.
Enjoying beverages and whiskeys.
Amagani. Yeah. And we
whiskey.
stumbled into this, and look in this
Look
room.
at all the whiskey.
There are people giving out samples of vodka
There are like
and all
8
kinds
different
of stuff.
distilleries here.
What a thing you can find
I'll tell you,
you're
one
in the
little
West Bottoms.
afternoon in the West Bottoms. What an adventure.
right here in Hawville.
Unbelievable.
You might love it, you might hate it. It's my favorite freaking show.